On Tuesday, Russian forces launched one of its deadliest attacks on Ukraine since the invasion began in February 2022. At least 51 people have been killed after two ballistic missiles were launched from Russian-occupied Crimea into a military academy and a neighbouring hospital in the city of Poltava. Poltava, a major military city of Ukraine, sits right between Kiev and Kharkiv and is only 100 miles from Russia's border. In a separate attack, in the early hours of Wednesday morning, Russian forces attacked the western city of Lviv with drones and hypersonic missiles, killing 7 people, including 3 children. Joining me now for a detailed analysis on the latest in the Russia-Ukraine war is former British Colonel Hamish Gordon. Hamish, thank you so much for your time today. I think let's break down what's happened in the last 36 hours. Can you walk me through these latest 2 attacks?
Well, sure. I mean, firstly, yesterday in Poltava, as you said, a town that is synonymous with the military, couple of hundred miles or so from the Russian border and betwixt Kharkiv and Kyiv. The attack yesterday appeared to be 2 Iskander missiles. These are long-range, precision-guided missiles launched from well inside Russia, probably 200 miles inside Russia, had a devastating impact. And I think it really illustrates 2 key points. Firstly, as President Zelensky has said, the lack of air defense for such a city the size Poltava not to have decent air defense, is really bad news. And the casualty rate there is horrendous, just showing how effective these missiles are. And the fact that they can be launched, completely unfettered by the Ukrainians is crazy. And it highlights the issues that we've discussed before, that Ukraine is fighting with at least one hand tied behind its back. It has the weaponry to stop these Iskander missiles being launched. It has the British Storm Shadow missile. It has long-range ATACMS from the US, which, if it was allowed to fire into Russia, it could stop these dreadful events happening. Similarly, when we look at the attacks in Lviv in the early hours of this morning, as you say, killing 7 people, killing a whole family, from what I understand as well. I mean, these are long-range attacks. Again, Lviv is the second city. The fact it's not fully protected is really, this is, NATO and the US should hold their heads in shame. Hopefully, the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister in London, is listening to this and acting. And similarly in Washington, let's hope that President Biden wants to leave a really decent legacy of his time and allow Ukraine to defend itself properly.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that. For the President Biden eventually, hopefully, signing off on this permission to use those long-range missiles, Hamish. But, a few weeks ago, you and I were speaking and we thought Ukraine was on the front foot of this war. They're pushing into Russian territory instead of being on the defence the way the army had been acting in the last few years. But these latest attacks, they've caused an urgent response from President Zelensky to publicly plead for world partners to help Ukraine with air defence, as you said before. Now, the White House has said that it is sending more aid in the next few weeks, but will it be this air defence equipment that Ukraine has said that they need, and will it make it on time?
Well, that's why it is so frustrating that Ukraine militarily is on the front foot. The Kursk maneuver, now that Ukraine has the Kursk salient, it was a blindingly successful military operation. But when you have success, you must back it up and reinforce it. And NATO and the US have not allowed Ukraine to do that. And that is absolutely criminal from a military perspective. When it comes to the air defense, is it going to arrive in time? Well, if the US says today it's going to send some air defense missiles and then tomorrow more civilians are killed in Lviv, then obviously not. Let's not dissuade the Americans from sending more air defense, as NATO countries should do as well. But quite frankly, the most important thing that the US and the UK and France can do at the moment is allow Ukraine to use its long-range precision missiles like Storm Shadow, like long-range ATACMS, to prevent Russia firing these missiles at civilian targets in Ukraine. I mean, that would be dead easy. I understand, Prime Minister Starmer could do this anyway with Storm Shadow. Yeah, but at the moment seems to be focused elsewhere, and quite, that one understands the pressures he's under. But quite frankly, if he gets this wrong in Ukraine, we could all be fighting the Russians in Europe. So it's key. Yeah, get more air defense in there. But today, allow the Ukrainians to use the weapons we've given them till their full extent. And if that means firing at targets, a couple of 100 miles into Russia, absolutely do that, because that's where these missiles are being launched from.
Exactly, Hamish, because these strikes that came from Crimea the other day, they're travelling a long range of 450 kilometres into Moldova using that long range missile capabilities that they have. So I guess Ukraine, as you said, they're waiting for the US to finally grant permission for them to actually use the long missiles to the extent of which they can actually go. And when you have the Biden administration and Western allies saying that they're sticking to their word, saying that they have Ukraine's back 100%, whatever aid they need, they can have, it kind of counteracts that when you're holding them back from using the military equipment that they have, not letting them use it to its full extent.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, and really, when we look at it dispassionately, some of these politicians are playing fast and loose with the Ukraine people. We look at our own Prime Minister Starmer. There is no reason why he shouldn't allow this to happen. His administration is saying that there needs to be some American agreement. Well, I don't get that at all. This is a British missile, designed and made by ourselves and the French, and I'm sure it can be fired without US permission. Maybe we require French permission, but I can't see the French asking us permission to do anything. So I think Starmer needs to, really show that he's worthy of his new position and make some really strong decisions, rather than spending his time on other things which might be very important for him domestically, but actually on the global stage he needs to show what he is. And similarly, in the US, we would hope Biden doesn't have a dog in this political fight anymore. He's retiring, he's given up. So he won't stymie Kamala Harris with any of this, these issues that might upset the American people. So let's hope he will be bold and make the decision. It is an easy decision to make, and it will make a huge difference. Not only will it prevent these missiles being fired, but it'll be another nail in Putin's coffin. And we discussed last week how rattled he is after the Kursk maneuver, how even his most favored pundits in Moscow on their nightly news programs are now questioning his abilities to conduct this war, his abilities to be president of Russia. We need them to be shouting at Putin more, because Putin will be brought down more easily by people within his own circle than the war going on in Ukraine. And the way to do that is to make sure that Ukraine stays on the front foot and gets into a position where it can negotiate a peace on their terms. And that allows them to allow them to attack these targets in Russia before they're launched at civilian cities in Ukraine.
Well, you need NATO, I guess, to be putting the pressure on the Biden administration to actually be giving the go-ahead for Ukraine to use these, because otherwise you've just got Russia using their weapons to that extent and firing long range straight into Ukraine without any warning. So I guess it's the only answer for right here and right now. But Hamish, moving on, there seems to be a silent killer that Putin's army have been using against Ukraine, and that, of course, is the use of gas. Can you walk them through exactly what the Russian troops have been using and how they use it against the Ukrainian troops?
Yes, this is a remarkable activity that I've wrote extensively about in the Telegraph over the last few days. And also the Kyiv Independent published a detailed report. And it's remarkable, and people would be surprised. And I'm really surprised it's not more of a world issue. This is World War I type activity, where the most basic chemical weapons, in this case, CS gas and chloropicrin are being dropped by drones onto Ukrainian trenches, ostensibly in the Donbass. And we've seen where Russia made advances in Bakhmut earlier this year, and that was enabled by gas. And at the moment in the Donbass, where they're pushing forward again the use of gas, and the Russians are using this on an industrial scale. The report in the Kyiv Independent and a report that the Ukraine government have sent to the United Nations organization that investigates these things, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, details 4,000 uses of chemical weapons, and the majority of those, 3,400, since February this year. You know, some units on the front line are being hit 2 or 3 times a day. And what is happening is, because the Ukraine soldiers do not have effective gas masks, those who have gas masks have old Soviet ones, which are rubbish and don't work. The CS gas and the chloropicrin gets into the trenches. It's an incapacitant. It means you can't breathe. It makes you nauseous. It makes you sick. And the only way to save yourself without a gas mask is to get out of the trench and run. And with these drones dropping the chemical weapons, there are also surveillance drones and attack drones. And they then attack the soldiers and bring down artillery on them. And inch by inch, the Russians are crawling forward. And it suits the Russian conscripts, who have virtually no training. The Russian conscripts can march behind these clouds of gas, exactly as the Germans did in the First World War. But we know from the First World War, the way to stop this is to give your soldiers decent protective equipment. And really, that is what the Ukraine military need, decent gas masks. And, you know, I'm incredibly frustrated because, you know, I know that Britain is the biggest producer and the best producer of gas masks in the world. We supply all the needs of the US military, the British military, and the NATO military. And the fact that we can't find a few thousand to give the Ukraine army that would stop this, and just to reinforce the fact that this is how Russia is making gains in the Donbass. Everything else has been stalemate. The fact that we can't give them this stuff, which I'm sure is on the shelves somewhere in the UK and no doubt in the US and other NATO countries, seems to me ridiculous. But which is why it's so important that people like myself highlight these issues, and hopefully Western and NATO leaders are listening. And this is a really easy sort of non-combative support that we can give, non-lethal support, and we could give it now, and it would really turn this around straight away.
It is imperative that the British government do take those masks to Ukraine immediately. But Hamish, this gas, such as the CS or the chloropin, I can't even say it, chloropicrin, it's illegal under the 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention. Why is there no reprimand for this in war? It seems that the war crimes just get completely overlooked when it comes to Vladimir Putin. The International Criminal Court has already issued an arrest warrant for war crimes that Putin committed last year, and nothing's done.
Well, you're absolutely right, and it is shocking. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons should be in Ukraine now, investigating it. The International Atomic Energy Agency has shown the way by going to visit the Kursk nuclear power station and also the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station, which again could be used as an improvised nuclear weapon. But I think a lot of it goes back to the Obama red line in 2012, when President Obama was president of the US and the Syrian regime were using chemical weapons or threatening to in Syria, the Syrian conflict, which I spent many years looking for the evidence and collecting the evidence of. When Assad used chemical weapons on the 21st of August 2013, killed 1,500 civilians, the international community did nothing, and the red line evaporated. And it sort of gave carte blanche to any tyrant, terrorist group, or rogue state to use chemical weapons. So that is why the Russians are doing it. Yeah, these might just be right control agents, but they're viewed as chemical weapons. They're called Schedule 3 agents under the Chemical Weapons Convention. They are illegal, and they're also illegal under the Geneva Convention. So we know that, as you said, Putin is already an indicted war criminal. This is yet another war crime. But we have got to register this, and we've got to get the International Criminal Court to do something. Just a final adjunct from Syria. When I was there collecting evidence of chemical attacks, lots of the Syrians were saying, why is the West leaving us and not helping us to defend against Assad and the Russians?
Mm.
And I said, well, that is a political expedient at the time, but collect evidence, because that is where you will eventually these people would get their comeuppance. So I fought in the Bosnian wars, and most of those generals who committed genocide, like Radim Karadzic, are in jail. In fact, Karadic's in jail in the Isle of Wight in this country for the genocide, the Srebrenica genocide that he oversaw during that war. So, yeah, ultimately, Putin will get his comeuppance, but it is absolutely up to the United Nations and the International Criminal Court to make sure they collect the evidence so that he can be prosecuted along with his other war crimes as soon as that is practically possible.
Absolutely. Former British Colonel Hamish de Bretton Gordon, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.